For the last week, Detroit Lions fans have had to take one hit after another when it comes to getting some rather bad news. But in today's episode, I'm going to be giving some hope and letting Lions fans know that there is indeed fantastic news. You just have to know where to find it. Stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. Friends, I'm going to tell you something right now. For us Lions fans, this last week has been, a rather difficult one. You lose against the Washington Commanders in the divisional round. I mean, that already stings bad enough as it is. Then you have the situation that happens with Benedict Johnson, who literally 2 days after the loss just pretty much up and skips town to go to Chicago. Then 2 days after that, you lose both Terrell Williams and Aaron Glenn on the same day. One's going to New York to become their new head coach for the Jets, and then the other is going to New England, not too far down the road, to become the defensive coordinator for the Patriots, and, from what I'm also understanding, become the assistant head coach. So it's like, okay, from an outside perspective and just from a very basic rudimentary perspective, if you don't look at it any other way than what I just described, it is just like one body check, two body check, three body check, four body check. It's just like boom, 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 boom. You are just getting freaking body blows one after another. And that's what I've been seeing a lot on social media, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitter. Everybody's just like, man, this is just horrible. And there are a lot of Lions fans that are despairing, and the rivals that are out there, they're just yucking it up a minute. They're saying, oh, this is the end of the Lions. Enjoy the fact that you had your run because you're going back to the basement, blah, 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 this, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay. Somebody needs to remind everybody to keep a cool head. Somebody needs to remind everybody to keep the rational perspective. And need to understand that how you take news is based purely on a couple of factors. Number one, your outlook, but also number two, the perspective you put it in. Let me explain here. All those things that I just talked about, losing, Johnson, Glenn, Williams, lost the game against the Commanders. All those things, if you just take a look at them for the face value that they are, yeah, you're going to come to the natural conclusion it's all bad news. Which, okay, that's one way to look at it. I can't really, try and spin or twist a story upon, the loss against the Commanders as something positive. That one's just pretty much the way it is. My dad taught me this, and I'm sure a lot of other people that have watched my show, their dads probably taught them the same thing. Life is a shit sandwich. You're going to have to figure out where's the best bite to take, but it's still going to suck all the same. That's kind of like one of those bites. It sucks. There's no way around it. You're just going to have to take your lump and move on. Okay, but then we start talking about the coaches that we've lost. The two main ones, Johnson and Glenn, that's where a lot of this negativity is spawning from for a lot of people because they're like, man, how can we possibly replace these guys? These guys have been with us for the last, 3-4 years. They're such an integral, crucial part of what's made this team what it is. It's going to be hard replacing them. Only if you're thinking about it in the prospect of, they've been here for so long that it's not likely we're going to find somebody that's going to come right in and, be able to fill their shoes. But here's where that perspective thing I was talking about, that outlook thing I was talking about comes into, absolutely prime focus. Why would you want somebody to fill those shoes? And furthermore, why would you expect someone to fill those shoes? Case in point, how many times do we hear on freaking, ESPN and every other sports show, oh, this guy's going to be the next this guy, this guy's going to be the next that guy? Stop it. And I've tried to get people to understand that. Stop trying to do that because it's never going to happen. You're not going to find another Joe Montana. You're not going to find another Dan Marino. You're not going to find another Peyton Manning. You're not going to find another Patrick Mahomes, another Tom Brady. Why? Because there's only one of them. They are a unique entity unto themselves. That's why they are who they are. So let's put it into that perspective with this conversation. Why would I go trying to find another Johnson and Glenn? I wouldn't, because you're not going to find them. You have to find somebody who is not going to fill their shoes, but makes their own shoes, so to speak. Finds their own way, makes their own indent in the job. So when you think about it from that perspective, okay, now I'm not looking at things with a doom and gloom perspective because I'm trying to find somebody who's going to do exactly what those guys did. Now I look at it as an opportunity. And when you look at it as an opportunity, now you're not confined trying to fit within what somebody was originally doing. Now you have a wide open range. You have a wide open prospect of things that could potentially happen. Now I know for some people that's a bit worrisome because that means both good or bad could happen. But let me tell you this, I'm the type of person that rather than being confined on an art canvas, I would much rather have limitless possibilities to paint whatever image I want. Because here's what I can tell you, you're only limited by how far you think you can go. If you don't put any limits on yourself, you can go as far as you want. Same thing applies here. So let's take a look at that. Think about the whole prospect of an offensive coach looking at our team. Looking at our offense. If I was an offensive coach that was looking for the perfect opportunity to make my mark, to make my bid, the Detroit Lions offense would be the absolute dream job. Here's why. Look at our offense. You've got a stacked offensive line. Yes, that's not to say it's not perfect. It's also not to say that it doesn't have some weaknesses. But trying to find another offensive line that has the talent across the board that we do, you're going to be hard-pressed to find. It doesn't have its flaws, but it is pretty damn good. Then you take a look at the weapons we have. You've got a top 10 receiver in freaking Amon-Ra St. Brown. You have arguably one of the fastest wide receivers and just a literal weapon from anywhere on the field in Jameson Williams. You've got a solid veteran receiving option in Tim Patrick. You have a top 5 tight end in freaking Sam Laporta. You have a top 5 quarterback in Jared Goff. And you have the best 1-2 running back tandem in Sonic and Knuckles. If I'm an offensive coordinator, I'm like, dude, how in the hell could I possibly fail? I've literally got nothing but weapons here. The only thing that's going to fail me is 1, injuries, knock on wood, or 2, my own inability to use my imagination to push the boundaries of what I can do. Because again, when you're talking about an offense, you are quite literally limited by your own imagination. The more you're willing to imagine, the more you're willing to push the boundary and say, hey, what if I try this? What if I try that? That is where you start running into problems. But if you say, hey, there's no limit to what we can try, let's just see what happens, you have the potential to do almost damn near anything you want. And think about it. The offense that we've had, we've been able to do damn near virtually anything we have wanted to do. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, David, that's a nice, great, grand, glorious thought, and that sounds all nice and well. But it sounds like you're trying to paint a fantasy picture here. That's not reality. Really? It's not reality? Let me ask you this question. How did, Ben Johnson kind of come on the scene here? I'm actually going to use his real name for this. How did he come into this whole thing? He came in, was given a shot by Goff and by freaking Campbell to become the offensive coordinator. What happened? Goff sat down with him. He pretty much said, hey, here's what I want to do. I want to take some of the things that you do really well at, and I want to take some of the things that I've picked up from other places, and I want to make this offense. Goff said, okay, I like that. And then from there, they built this offense into what it was, and what it was this year. And every single year, it got more progressive and more ridiculously, well, number one, creative, but also explosive. Because let's remind ourselves here, what was Ben Johnson doing before being the passing game coordinator and offensive coordinator of the Lions? Oh, that's right. He was the tight ends coach that was brought in by Matt Patricia. And prior to that, he was sitting on his ass on a couch at his house wondering if he was going to ever coach again. That's what I'm trying to say. If you're willing to take an opportunity and use whatever means you have as far as your imagination, you will be surprised how far you can take things. And here's the other way I'm going to try and put this in a positive light. Everybody's trying to say, well, David, there's no way we can ever know that we're going to get somebody that was on the same level or, better than, Johnson. Well, one, we're not going to know until we try. But also, number two, let me remind y'all what some people were starting to say about Johnson while he was here. Everyone was starting to say that people were starting to figure out his schemes. Because, that's right, how many freaking trick plays did we have to run this year? We probably ran double the amount of trick plays this year than we've normally ran in offensive years, the last couple of years combined. We ran trick play after trick play after trick play. It got so bad, people were like, dude, the Lions are just trying to flex on the entire of the NFL. They got tired of seeing all the trick plays that freaking Johnson was drawing up and trying to run. Now, some people, myself included, would say that was probably him trying to draw people's attention as to what he could do. But in the same vein, and if we're being kind of serious at the same moment, some of that was also out of necessity because it's like, hey, we need to shake things up here because people are starting to catch on to what we do, so we need to throw them a curveball every now and then. So, put it into perspective here. You have a new offensive-minded coach. He comes in with the same ensemble of weapons that Johnson had, but now he's got a fresh idea. He's now got a fresh perspective to take a look at said weapons and apply his own offensive mind to it to now say, hey, I can still use the same terminology. I can still use the same stuff to a certain degree that, Johnson had and work with Goff. But now I can put my own little twist to it. I can put my own little flavor, my own little spice in here and make it different. You want to know why that's important? Because what have I said in the past? And this comes from Marty Schottenheimer, one of the great coaches in the NFL. You have to reinvent yourself every year. Well, when you're running a similar offensive concept for the last 4 years, and people are now starting to pick up on what you do really well, even though you still are doing it well, but they're starting to pick up on it a little bit better each year. Tell me something right now, folks, and this is my ultimate point here with the offense. You have an offense that has all of the weapons that it has. It's seasoned, it's well-tuned, everybody's familiar with one another. But now you throw in a completely new offensive mind to take that well-seasoned machine and pretty much supercharge it with new ideas. Which now means every defense out in the NFL is now going to be like, well, what the hell are they going to do now? Because this isn't Ben Johnson running this offense as far as calling plays. It's this guy. And we don't know how that's going to mix once you put those two together because nobody has film on that yet. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that's the offensive side of this. That's fantastic news. But now think about the defense here. Now, yes, I know the defense ended this year on a whimper in essence because of all the injuries. And you know what? That's nothing that coaching can control. Injuries are out of your control pattern because they just happen. It sucks. There's nothing you can do about it except deal with it as best you can. But even for the defensive coordinator job, think about it from this way. You have got a defense that has a lot of good talent on it that is, one, young, but also, two, is still developing. Think about this one, folks. We've already seen a lot of the young talent on offense that I just talked about. It's already pretty much, shown its true colors as to what it can be. Gibbs, Jamo, St. Brown, Laporta. We've already seen all that, and that's awesome. Same thing with Sewell. But think about this. On defense, we're just starting to scratch the surface with some of the guys that we have. We only got to see part of Aiden Hutchinson this year. Played only, 5 games? And he had 7.5 sacks in those 5 games. We barely scratched the surface of what he could truly do in the potential that he had for this year So it's like, okay, now we get to see that next year with a new defensive scheme potentially, or at the very least, a new defensive-minded coach that can find new ways, potentially better ways, to use him. And then you get to pair him alongside Za'Darius Smith, and then potentially other guys that we might get in the draft, like maybe a Jack Sawyer or whoever hell else you might get. And then you take a look at guys like Jack Campbell. Jack Campbell took a huge step this year as a linebacker, especially when Anzalone stepped out. But he did amazing for the majority of the year, and he still has room to grow. And then you've got guys like Arnold and Rakestraw. Arnold definitely had to take some of his lumps this year, but I thought he did a pretty solid job. And you know what? The more time he gets in the system, the more time he gets in the NFL and gets proper tutelage from coaching, he's only going to get better. And that means, hey, you know what? You keep your position coach, Deshea Townsend. Oh, hey, you keep a mentor on so that way, you know what? He continues to grow, like a Carlton Davis. Hey, you also keep competition that's in the same class, like Rakestraw. And again, just like with the offensive concept that I just talked about, you have a defensive-minded guy who's coming in and is looking at all of these pieces that we have, and it's like, hey, there's a lot of crap here to work with that I can really do some damage with. Because again, let's just call it for what it is. You take a look at that front defensive line. You've got Za'Darius Smith, you've got Kaminsky, you've got Hutchinson, you got Levi, you got Broderick, you got Aleem McNeil, you got DJ Reader. I mean, it's just da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You've got a revolving door. Again, the only thing that stopped that was the injuries. But if you're able to reverse that, now you've got limitless potential there to do whatever the John Brown hell you want. Then you go to the linebackers. Again, you got Malcolm Rodriguez. You've got freaking, Campbell. You've got Anzalone. You've got Barnes. And then you've got Nowalski and, who's that other guy that we had this year? Those guys have all proven that when you need them, they can come through. And chances are we're going to add even more competition to further get more out of that room. And then you take a look at the defensive backfield. Probably the best it's been in a long time, but again, because of injuries, it got decimated. But even still, Kirby Joseph, 9 interceptions on the year. Absolute ridiculous all-pro ball hawk. You got Brian Branch, who's one of the most feared safeties in the fact that he will come up and literally thwop you. You've got Terrion Arnold, who is growing into becoming a potentially really damn good cornerback. And you've also got Carlton Davis, who is no slouch either. He's a very solid cornerback. So, again, you take a look at the defense, it's not perfect. It has some areas where it could stand to improve a bit. Definitely a little bit more than the offense. But we saw in the first 5 weeks of this last, season, how damn good this defense could truly be. How imposing, how dominating, how freaking frightening this defense could be. Because when you had a healthy Hutch, who, let's call it for what it is, was by himself, was pretty much the only option we had opposite of McNeil as a pass rushing element, it was hard to stop just him. Stop just him. Now you bring back all of that, McNeil, Hutch, Za'Darius Smith, and then, like I said, you potentially add yet another weapon, whether through free agency or trade, like, a Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, or you go into the draft and you get a Jack Sawyer, like I said. Dude, if I was a defensive coordinator, I would be salivating at the possibility of doing a whole bunch of different things to wreck an offense's day. Because on defense, you quite literally are going out to wreck somebody's afternoon. And when you have the weapons up front like I'm talking about, you have a great potential of doing that. So what I'm trying to get here is this. How you find the fantastic news that I'm talking about here is you have to rearrange your perspective. You can look at it as, yeah, man, we've lost our coaches. How in the hell are we ever going to replace them? That's the negative way to look at it. That's the doom and gloom perspective. If you take a look at it with a positive mindset and take a look at it as an opportunity for something even better to come in, now you have nothing but a whole bunch of hope and joy at the prospect of saying, okay, here, let's take a look at how Dan Campbell has done with his hiring of coaches in the past. Gee, only nailed on, Ben Johnson, nailed on Aaron Glenn, nailed on all these other guys that we've brought in. In fact, most of the coaches that Dan Campbell has brought in have been pretty damn solid. I mean, for crying out loud, we don't really rotate a whole bunch of our position coaches, except on defense for the first 2 years. But other than that, I mean, we've done a pretty good job of being continuitous when it comes to our coaching staff. So I'm more than confident that Dan Campbell is not only going to find the right fit from a cultural perspective, but he's going to find the right person that can not only keep the offense and defense where it was, but push it even further. And again, when you put that in the context of what we were able to accomplish this year, that ought to excite you quite a damn bit. Because again, what has Campbell and what has Holmes constantly said? We are always looking to improve. Not to stay stagnant, always get better. So if you take a look at that thought process and you put it in the perspective of what I'm talking about, then whoever Campbell and Holmes bring in to replace Glenn and Johnson, don't think of it as them trying to match what they did. Think of it as them trying to surpass greatly what they were able to do in the first place. And that ought to freaking excite the hell out of you. Anyway, having said that, I think I've, driven home the point, and hopefully I've been able to give you guys something to, throw on your record spinner and think about a little bit. So having said that, I'm going to end this episode and say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage you all to watch the next episode. Also encourage you all to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, I want to highly encourage you all, please make sure you hit that bell notification icon so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. Also want to highly encourage you all, please share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share anywhere and everywhere you possibly can, because the more we can do that, the greater the channel can grow and spread. And with that being said, I just hope everybody that's watching this content got something out of it. Hopefully you got something, to think about, because it doesn't matter if you guys have just watched me for the first time or you guys have been watching me for a long time. I truly want you guys to always come away with something new and learn something. I also hope everybody's got something in their life that makes them happy, makes them smile. God bless, my friends, and until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.